My name is Peter Popalis. This is my place in Canadian history. My story first starts in 1937 when my grandfather, Cisco Filkoff, was born in the small town of Kalanick, southern Macedonia. He was born into a time of unrest, poverty, and revolution as Macedonia was fighting to liberate itself and earn back its stolen land due to the Axis invasion of northern Greece and Macedonia. His family was fortunate enough to own a cattle farm. However, it was still very difficult to put food on the table as his brother Peter died of polio when he was a baby because they could not access the proper medical assistance in time. In hopes of a better life, Cisco, being the oldest, decided to leave his family behind in 1951 in search of a better life. With Canada finally forming its Immigration and Citizen Department in 1950, Cisco made his decision. He would first scrounge his way across Greece on bus and train before arriving in Athens, where he met up with two of his cousins, George and Nick. They would then board the ship Nea Hellas, New Greece, in search of New Hope overseas. With just enough money for transportation, he purchased a ticket to Halifax, Nova Scotia. His ticket was very cheap, however, which meant he bunked with 3 other men in the lower part of the boat in a room the size of a closet. With a passion to always do more, Cisco looked at Canada as a place where he could build himself up, as he was informed Canada was the promised land for new immigrants like him. Once arriving in Pier 21 Halifax, with 6,000 other Macedonians and Greeks, he was given a box of Kellogg's cornflakes. This was his first introduction to Canadian life. He since then has had a bowl of cornflakes every morning. He then boarded a train for Toronto, where he had arranged for a sponsor that would take him in and provide him a place to stay while he looked for a job. At the time, my grandfather was only 14 years old, living in the cupboard under the stairs. Cisco had to earn his living and send it to his family overseas to fund their journey to Canada. Once in Toronto, he found odd jobs like shining shoes for Bay Street businessmen and lawyers. He then found good work in the restaurant business. Cisco had never received quality education and looked to the restaurant business to make his mark. Him, as well as many other Macedonians, had little to no education. However, they proved to be hard workers and perfectionists in service and industrial industries. He worked by washing dishes and waiting tables until he had enough money to bring his father, mother, and sister over. Once they arrived, they opened their own restaurant, Rapid Open Kitchen, a restaurant for anyone who needed a fast and gourmet meal. They also bought a home in 1955 in the neighborhood of Willowdale in Toronto. The approval of the First Macedonian Pacific Church in Toronto in 1952, St. Clement of Ohrid, was a very significant event to my grandfather. He met my grandmother, Vera, there in 1956 at this church event. They were married in 1962. My grandmother also has an interesting story. She was also born in the village of Starica in northwestern Macedonia in 1942. Due to Axis pressures and a heavily aging population at the time, the government set up a child refugee program to protect the children. They went to all the towns and took 2,898 small children under 10 years old for their protection, and put them on a train and sent them to live in Hungary, where they were raised by nurses in a boarding school. She was there for 7 years until the war was over, before she ever saw her family again. Her 2 older brothers were not with her because they were old enough to fight in the war. Their country needed their support for the liberation of Macedonia. Her parents, Nick and Fauna, went on ahead and headed for Canada. They were to meet her in Toronto. Her parents bought a home in Hillcrest in 1954, found work, and were established by the time she came to Canada. She was now 13. It was like seeing her parents for the first time. She worked and went to school and even graduated from high school in Toronto. She felt very proud of herself. She then met my grandfather and they got married in 1962. As she felt very pressured by Canadian lifestyle, she resolved that when she watched a game of the 1967 Stanley Cup Finals at Maple Leaf Gardens. This was a result to her problem. They had 3 daughters, one of them being my mom, Florence. My mom was born in 1968 and she is a dental assistant. My dad is Peter, and he was born in 1969 and he is a chartered accountant. They were both born and raised in Toronto. They met through my uncle in 1992 and married in 1994. They reside in the nearby neighborhood and now city of Markham and had 2 boys, Brandon and Petey. The sacrifices and struggles from my ancestors are the reason I thrive today. This is my place in Canadian history.